During the next half hour, we'll explore the development of a fighter that many believe was the best in the lead up to the turn of this century. It wasn't developed from a line of planes previous to it. This aircraft was built from the ground up for a very specific purpose. However, this aircraft does have some attributes and a similar appearance to another famous fighter. The F-15 Eagle is an all-weather, extremely maneuverable tactical fighter. To many, the F-15 may seem similar to the F-14 Tomcat. Both have a twin tail assembly and large air dams. Both planes are an example of large fighters as they are dimensionally similar. The prime difference is that the Tomcat was designed for carrier-based operations, and the Eagle was purely intended as a single-minded fighter aircraft, and the similarity ends with their appearance. The F-15's superior maneuverability and acceleration are achieved through high engine thrust-to-weight ratio and low wing loading. This combination permits the pilot to turn the aircraft without losing airspeed. The single pilot has a head-up display of information from the advanced electronic weaponry systems, which detects, acquires, and tracks enemy aircraft. It's commonly thought the F-15 can outperform and outfight any current fighter. This may be true, but there's one other aircraft that could possibly claim the crown of best fighter. Many planes have been developed in high secrecy. The Blackbird and Valkyrie are two examples of the USA's secret programs. However, the Soviet Union was also testing many advanced aircraft designs that were kept under a black curtain of secrecy. During 1968, at a Soviet airshow, the closing scene was the one that brought the black curtain down. 3 huge fighters roared over the crowd, which included numerous Western delegates. No other insight to the plane was offered by the Soviet Union. 3 months later, an Israeli F-4 Phantom investigated an airspace breach, and the pilot got a visual on the new Foxbat. This was a brief encounter as the Foxbat simply accelerated away from the F-4. This is some rare footage of Foxbats in training. It's believed by some that during the Gulf War, an Iraqi MiG-25 or Foxbat downed an F-18 Hornet, and that other skirmishes between US planes and Iraqi Foxbats clearly demonstrated the MiG's superiority over the US fighters. The facts are hard to find, but it is known that the Foxbat can achieve Mach 3, and that makes it the fastest fighter. The F-15 Eagle may not have the outright speed of the Foxbat, but it has many other virtues that place it in the running as the best fighter. The F-15's design was not a progressive step from a predecessor. It was a new package with new objectives. Air combat in Vietnam showed a flaw in the US Air Force. It didn't have planes that could actually take on other fighters. It had interceptors that were capable of keeping slower-moving bombers at bay, and it did have the very successful F-4 Phantom as a multi-role fighter bomber. The Phantom carried a wide and devastating range of weaponry, and it had superior avionics than the MiGs that it opposed in Vietnam. The plane was also reliable as it had 2 engines and was fast by those days' standards. but it was often outmaneuvered by MiGs that were designed specifically as fighters. This is not to say the Phantom wasn't a great plane. It was capable of Mach 2 and was extremely versatile. It was originally built as a high-altitude carrier-based interceptor for the Navy, and it performed that job well. The Phantom also achieved something no other American-built fighter had been able to do. It was used by all three of America's defense bodies. After World War II, the US mainly built multi-role planes or fighter bombers, and here was the problem. When planes like the Phantom mixed it with dedicated fighters such as the MiGs in Vietnam, it was only superior avionics and better technology that gave them the edge. It was obvious to the United States that it needed a dedicated fighter if it was to maintain air power with an enemy that had more modern aircraft than the Vietnamese. So the United States government announced an industry competition to submit fighter designs. The competition brought out a couple of planes that had already been rejected previously. North American Aviation presented the F-15. This plane was exactly what the military wanted. It was highly maneuverable and was dedicated to air-to-air combat. However, it was deemed too slow. Sadly, the last version of the plane did achieve a top speed that exceeded Mach 2, and this would have made an impact on the judges of the competition. But it was a case of too little, too late. This baby-sized fighter did get the chance to show the military how good it really was, and it did this flying against the F-15 Eagle and other frontline fighters. Another entry in the competition was the Kelly Johnson-designed F-104. Although this plane had been around for some time, Kelly Johnson still believed that with some refinement, the F-104 would outfly anything created to that date and in the near future. Kelly had proved his point on a number of occasions. Every time a new world record for speed or altitude was set, Kelly simply rolled out an F-104 and reinstated the 104's superiority. As the competition got closer to the mark, Kelly merely did some tweaking to the 104 and sent it out again to better the best. This occurred mostly through the years of 1958 to 1960. A classic example is the case of the Phantom F-42. Just after it had beaten the F-104 record, Lockheed sent a starfighter out to raise the bar another level. For entry in the competition, a one-off version of the 104 was built. It was named Lancer and was given larger wings and other modifications which increased maneuverability. Although the 104 and the Lancer were remarkable planes, the Lockheed bid was not successful in winning the competition. Later, Kelly was still adamant that the Lancer would still have outperformed the F-15. The competition ended on December 23, 1969, when McDonnell was awarded the contract for 20 F-15s. It's interesting to note that McDonnell's greatest success to this point in time was the F-4 Phantom II, which was one of the planes that indicated a weakness in the US fleet of planes that brought about the competition that they won with the F-15. McDonnell was formed about 3 months before the outbreak of World War II and was mostly involved with manufacturing parts for other larger aircraft companies. One of their prime clients was the much larger Douglas Company, and within a short time of McDonnell winning the F-15 competition, these two companies merged. The company's founder, James McDonnell, was like many of the early aviation pioneers. He was a visionary and propelled McDonnell to greater and greater heights by staying on top of and developing new technologies. It was these virtues that the company used to design and create the F-15. The prototype was constructed at McDonnell's St. Louis plant. Prototype 1 was rolled out to an audience of government and defense officials and the press on the 26th of June, 1972.
I christen the Eagle, and may you reign supreme in your domain.
Hear, hear.
The plane had great lines, looked bold, and the raised canopy gave the pilot great all-round vision. The computer-operated variable air intakes optimized performance for all angles of attack. The F-15 utilized a large air brake to enhance performance under certain conditions. Its cannons were built into the air dams. The initial Eagles were fitted with 4 medium-range Sparrow missiles and 4 shorter-range Sidewinder missiles. The twin fins gave the pilot more control over the aircraft in the event of an engine failure. They also greatly enhanced this big fighter's maneuverability. The total package looked impressive, but it was still to be flown. Much preparation goes into a first flight. Technicians, electricians and airframe specialists all have to be satisfied that every last detail has been checked and double-checked. The first flight is where theory meets practical, and the loss of the plane means the loss of a very substantial investment. Here, the plane has been secured to the ground for its engines to be tested. The red markings on the craft identify the plane as a prototype. When everybody is satisfied, the test pilot is given the all clear to take the craft for its first flight. Not only is a large investment at risk at this critical time, there's also a life at stake. Many test pilots have been killed during the early flights of new planes. In this instance, the first prototype F-14 Tomcat was lost in a test flight. Both pilots, Smythe and Miller, survived this accident. However, Miller was not so lucky a short time later. He died when test flying Tomcat number 10. The F-104 test series is another example of the high risks test pilots endured, as a number of accidents occurred while flying this extreme machine. This is Edwards Air Force Base, and the date is July 27, 1972. The pilot who put his life on the line to test Lockheed's theory of flight regarding the F-15 was Irv Burroughs. The test pilots were generally employed by the manufacturers of the planes. However, on some projects, Air Force pilots worked alongside the company pilots. Irv Burroughs positions the F-15 for its first test. The F-100 Pratt & Whitney turbo fan engines are accelerated to takeoff speed, and the brakes are released. The plane is carefully launched down the runway, while the ground crew anxiously watch their work of art take to the air. The first flight of a prototype generally consists of a takeoff, a short flight and a landing. During the flight, the pilot familiarises himself with the characteristics of the craft and tests the plane's primary functions. The Eagle's first flight was a success. Its grace and size is apparent when its landing is viewed in slow motion. It's easy to see how the variable air dam has tilted to keep a maximum of airflow possible. Irv appears to be able to control the plane to the degree that he can hold it in the balance between takeoff and landing. The initial test, such as this, doesn't prove a plane's success. It only proves that the craft can fly. However, the initial flight does give the pilot and crew an insight to the likelihood of the plane to reach the design's goals. In the case of the F-15's first test, it proved that the Eagle was very likely to more than achieve its forecast. For many months, prototype F-15s were tested in a variety of conditions and tasks. Each test was more demanding than the last. Finally, the aircraft's abilities had been fully explored. After more than 2 years of accident-free testing and evaluation, the first aircraft was delivered to the Air Force on November 14, 1974. In January 1976, the first Eagle destined for a combat squadron was delivered to the 1st Tactical Fighter Wing at Langley Air Force Base. Once in service, the F-15 was put to the test of proving it had covered the shortfalls of the American Air Force's lack of potent fighter planes, as demonstrated in Vietnam. To prove this, the F-15 was pitted against one of the most remarkable little fighters ever built, the Northrop F-5, the same aircraft that the F-15 had beaten in the original competition that bore the Eagle. In this competition, both fighters won, as no clear winner could be determined. Firstly, the baby-sized F-5 was perhaps the most maneuverable fighter ever to be built, and although the giant F-15 could track and follow the F-5, the reverse was also true. The little F-5 could and did hold its own against the might of the Eagle. It's fair to say that the Eagle would win a greater number of encounters between the two. However, the cost of the F-5 was half that of the Eagle, and if you placed 2 F-5s against an Eagle, the F-5 would win every time. Despite any argument, both planes proved to be outstanding aircraft, and they proved this most when pitted against each other. These tests and war games, although fiercely competitive, are conducted between colleagues and friends. There was a much deadlier game that the F-15 and its pilots had to play, and the game was played during the Cold War over the Bering Strait. Russian spy planes often flew reconnaissance missions, and F-15 pilots were sent to dissuade them. In this instance, a long-range Soviet bomber is probing US airspace. The plane has been picked up by a large radar facility in Alaska. The operators forward the information to patrolling F-15 Eagles, and the game begins. From the Alaskan facility, the Eagle pilots are updated on the Russians' movements, including position, height, and course. The Eagles are to intercept and make their presence felt. The following still images shot by an F-15 pilot demonstrate the latent feelings of the players. The F-15 has been produced in a number of models, and the latest and probably last is the F-15E. This is the most radical change of the variants. Originally, the Eagle was designed as an air-to-air combat plane, but even in the A model, it was recognized that the plane also had superior potential in the ground attack role. Finally, in 1987, this potential was realized in the form of the F-15E Strike Eagle. The F-15E is especially configured for deep strike missions, which involves venturing far behind enemy lines to attack high-value targets with a variety of munitions. The F-15E is a two-seat, two-engine dual-role fighter capable of speeds up to Mach 2.5. Although primarily a deep exclusion platform, the F-15E can also perform escort missions. It's ironic that a project to exclusively build a fighter turned out an excellent multi-purpose plane, which is exactly what the F-15 replaced in the form of the Phantom. The US Air Force can't expect to fly the F-15C to 2014 or beyond without spending significant money on upgrades. The F-15E structure is rated at 16,000 flight hours, or double the lifetime of earlier F-15s, and therefore they may be in the skies beyond 2020. However, a lineup of new fighters currently being tested and produced may cut even the F-15E's life expectancy to 2010. That concludes another episode of Flying Through Time. Be sure to join us again when we continue to unravel the fascinating stories of the planes that stand out in our short history of flight.